Welcome to Quick Clips. This is Dr. Tamara Harville, and I am going to give you some information about in-text citations using MLA format. First, there's a few terms that you would need to be familiar with. One is a formal introduction. What that is the first time you talk about a source in your paper, you want to give us the full name of all the authors and their title in quotation marks. Unless it's a book, then it goes in italics. An in-text citation, if you hear that, it means that the author, their name is in your text, but if there's parentheses at the end, it's just a page number. And I'm going to show you examples of these. A parenthetical, that is where the author and the page number, if there is one, is in parentheses at the end of the sentence. A direct quote is when you are using specific words directly from the source, and you're not just combining them with some of yours, like an in-text citation. You're saying, according to so-and-so, and you give us their quote. And then after you formally introduce the source the first time, then you can just refer to them by their last names. And then periods, they don't go in the quotation marks or the parentheses, they go at the very after. So let's look at these. Okay, so this is an example of Kenneth Burke's Language as Symbolic Action Essays on Life, Literature, and Method, a book published by the University of California. Okay, so a formal introduction has his full name and his title. In his book, Language as Symbolic Action Essays in Life, Literature, and Method, Kenneth Burke explains how symbols are used within literature. So we have his full name and we have his title. Use the title just like it would appear on Works Cited. If it's italicized, keep it italicized. If it's in quotes, you put it in quotes. Now this is where in the sentence, if you had any credentials on Kenneth Burke, like Professor Kenneth Burke or Kenneth Burke EDD or something like that, you'd give us a little bit of information about him if you have it. That just adds credibility. An in-text citation means the author's name is in your text. So after you introduce him the first time, he's always then called Burke. So humans have been described by Burke as symbol using animals, and this was located on page 3. Notice the period's not here, it's on the very outside. The parenthetical means you put his name in the parentheses. Humans have been described as symbol using animals, and then Burke 3. No comma, just name, page. If you don't have a page, you just don't put that. It would just be Burke then. Or here, if you didn't have a page number, it would just be a period then in the end. A direct quote. Burke mentions how the more humans project their feelings on a situation, the more the situation becomes symbolic to them. Page 33. Their words are in quotation marks. Now you can do what's called a paraphrase, which means you take their words, but you just write them in your own words. You still have to tell us that information came from Burke, even though you're not putting quotes around it. And then again, if you have no page number, you just say, Burke mentions how the more humans project their feelings in a situation, the more the situation becomes symbolic to them. The period just goes there. Kind of simple, right? If you don't have an author, just don't tell us you have one. So for an example with that, we see so many global warming hotspots in North America, likely because this region has more readily accessible climate data and more comprehensive programs to monitor and study environmental change. And this was from the article, Impact of Global Warming, page 6. So since you don't have an author, you don't do that. You don't put an author there. But on your Works Cited page, it would begin with the title and quotes. So that's how you would put it here. If it was a book, you would then italicize it. Okay? If you have multiple authors, if you have more than 3, you use et al. Period, which is basically Latin for and the other dudes. So Smith et al. Argue. Notice it's not Smith et al. Argue and not argues, because if you say they argue, that makes sense, right? Smith et al. Argue that tougher gun control is not needed in the United States, page 76. This is a paraphrase because nothing is quoted. It's all in our words, but we have to give them credit. Or the authors state, tighter gun control in the United States erodes Second Amendment rights. This is the parenthetical, so instead of putting them in the sentence, they're Smith et al. And then the page number. Notice the periods. Al has to have a period because that is abbreviated. Or the authors state, tighter gun control in the United States erodes Second Amendment rights, Smith et al. With no page number if you don't have one. Notice there's a period on each side of the quote. Kind of looks like a little face there, but that's how it's done. And if you just have two, you can just give us an and. A 2016 study suggests that stricter gun control in the United States will significantly prevent accidental shootings. And this is by Strong and Ellis, page 23. And that's how in-text citations are done. It's kind of simple. Hope it helps.